black? I'm not sure. So lovely people, the day today is going to be filled with lots of OKRs, and we'll get into that a little bit later. What exactly an OKR, an objective and key result, is, and what that actually means from I'm going to call it from a productivity perspective. So really, the takeaways or the agenda is we're going to go and talk about the advantages of OKRs, of course. We want to talk about the adoption and how you actually apply OKRs. It is actually not what a lot of people think, a project management capability. It's actually a work management capability. And then the definition of OKRs. We want to just give you a bit of an introduction of how you define them, how you can actually introduce that in your own company, and a couple of lessons learned from the ones that we have implemented. And I'll also showcase a couple of different ways how you can track OKR in the digital world, of course, including IQ on one hand, but also Microsoft introduced a new capability that they're called Viva Goals. For those of you who don't know what Viva is, it's sort of an employee engagement capability that Microsoft has in Office 365. It's really good. And what that means is it allows organizations to engage with their staff through these objectives and key results. Okay, so what are OKRs? Now, I think first of all, we need to understand that OKRs, which stands for objectives and key results, is a goal framework. And a goal framework that was introduced many years ago, actually, and has been revitalized over the last couple of years because we do recognize that measure what matters is important in an organization. We'll talk about in the Q&A session a little bit more about the measures and why it is important to measure them. But I think it's super important. That's why I highlighted that lower part. By design, the OKR framework works across teams to create a standard the whole company can adopt and gives purpose to teams and organizations. I know it's very fluffy, but what it really means is we align all of our teams and our individuals towards the objectives we want to accomplish, and these objectives are linked to our strategy, and sometimes they may actually be our strategy. Why do I say that? Well, okay, from a project management point of view, I'm just going to go from where to start. It's a slide deck I've been using for many years, and my general part is always, have you ever met a project manager that says, hey, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a project manager? It just doesn't happen. So therefore, we often need to determine from a project management perspective what the fundamentals are. Fundamentals for us are always the why, the how, and the what. And there you can see how old that slide deck is. Obviously, Simon Sinek influenced me greatly, and that's many years ago now. But I still believe that this holds sound to everything, in particular also project management. Why do I say that? Well, when I ask project managers, why do you implement the project? Often I get the answer, well, because they're told me so, in order, and often don't know the ultimate purpose. And this is really where we think about more tactically and strategically. So ultimately, an organization implements strategic goals that say, I want to increase my market share by 30%. They then break down this big chunk of plan into portfolios and into programs and ultimately into projects as well. And these projects now, in some form, need to have a correlation between the strategic goal and the benefit that these projects should accomplish. Now, this link between projects and strategic goals are very often very difficult. And actually, Brian, have you ever seen anybody that says, hey, my project contributed 0.3.5% of strategic goal A? Does that happen?
I have never seen that out in the wild. I have seen many people who would like it in a PMO, but from a project manager perspective, unfortunately not.
Yeah, it's difficult, right? Because ultimately, this is the value, and we're trying to measure project value in a whole bunch of different ways. Business cases, benefits, deliverables, outcomes. But what does that ultimately mean from an organizational value perspective? And I think this is where OKRs come into place, because ultimately we then want to be able to capture the information and want to be able to consolidate that so that we can see how we actually track and execute our strategy. Now, saying all of that, there are, of course, these components in there: the why, the strategic goal, the how, the process of how we want to execute our projects, and of course also what type of data we ultimately want to capture. I mean, project management tools essentially allow you to map business process to your data, digitizing your project management capability. However, the big part that we see is when we think about a top-down, how can I link my project or the data of my project to the accomplishment of the strategy? And that's really the big challenge that most PMOs face. That's why they often can't even justify their existence when it comes to value creation, because they can't find that formula of saying, hey, I'm doing all of this work so that you can actually accomplish your strategy. Now, with all of that being said, I would love to know how you guys do this. So how do you evaluate your project performance against strategic goals? You may say, oh, we don't do that at all, or we try to determine that through benefit realization. Maybe you guys use already OKRs, or maybe you justify that through business cases. I'd love to know how you can ultimately determine the performance of a project against your strategy. All right. What do you reckon? How many people do we have? We have, I think, 3,000 people on the call today. I wish there should be, really. And interestingly enough, yeah, some 12 respondents. Come on, guys, you can do better. We have more than 12 people here. I know that. I can see you. 17. Come on. We give you another 10 seconds. 9, 8. And we can see, which I'm not surprised about, Ryan. We try to justify the investment through the concept of a business case, right? Yeah. Which kind of makes sense. We need to write a nice piece of paper that says, hey, if you approve this business case, you will get all of those things. However, I wonder how many business cases are linking directly to the strategy, right?
And that's also again, how many business cases get then filed somewhere and never looked at again. So you never know if you're contributing to strategy.
That's a very good point here. So thank you for sharing your insights here. So you can see that 41% really is the justifying it through business cases. However, look, there are some organizations that use OKRs, Ryan, which is really good to see, and lovely that you guys joined. I hope that we can also hear from you and your experience. Okay. Now, look, the reason why I'm talking so fast is because we have lots and lots of questions at the end, and we generally run out of them. So I put my timer on 3/4 of an hour. It's going to go off, and that's when, no matter where I am, I'm going to go into questions so that we can ask questions as well. Let's get into the OKR. So ultimately, the purpose of the OKR is to provide focus, as we've seen, transparency, and all of those things. But the key really here is that we have objectives, what we want to accomplish, and the ability to measure them. So how do we want to measure success? Now, these measurements can happen in a whole bunch of different ways. This could be a number, this could be a percentage, this could be a dollar value, it could be a cost of revenue. However, it needs to be measurable, and I think that is really key here. And then you have the ability to track and execute those activities, either in our world through projects, but really it's also teams and even individuals. I'll show you the goals in a second, how Microsoft does that to individuals, but I want to also show you how we can execute those in the project world. So OKRs, objectives and key results. The ultimate purpose for the objectives and key results is to provide your staff and your organization with focus, with alignment, rowing into the same direction, as I like to call that, with engagement so that people know what they're doing, with transparency and accountability so that people actually have the ability to see how these OKRs are performed. And ultimately, the outcome is the execution of your strategic goals. I just wanted to make sure that we understand the why of these OKRs. There are 100 other reasons. These are the ones that I find are most important. Why is that important? I wrote here on the right hand the bricklayer parable many years ago. I know that somebody interviewed 3 different brickies, and the first person asked they asked the first bricklayer, "Why are you? What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I'm stacking bricks." And I've been told to ask the second bricklayer, who then says, "Well, you know, I'm trying to build a wall." And then they ask the third bricklayer, who then essentially says, "Hey, I am building a mansion." And that's really what the ultimate purpose was. It wasn't about laying bricks. It wasn't about building a wall. The focus was about building a palace or a house. And that is essentially what OKRs enable us to do, to focus on the tasks at hand. Now, before I go further into theory, I thought this time around I'm going to just show you the digitization of how this can be done. I do this on not longer than 5 minutes, I promise you. And if you are interested, I'm happy, contact us. I'm happy to run you through in more detail. But I want to show you, on one hand, the Microsoft Viva Goals capability, which in many ways is personal OKRs, as I like to call that, but you can also manage that in projects. And then I want to show you this in terms of the Sensei IQ as well. All right, so OKRs are what you see here right now is a Teams environment. You can see Teams has actually here the ability for you to sort of download apps and include them into your Teams environment, and one of them is called Viva Goals. Now, Viva Goals is relatively new to Microsoft. I think it's now not even 6 months old. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to measure organizational OKRs or your personal OKRs, of course. And just so that you can see that in that instance, we have an organization here that wants to achieve an objective of growing the business. Now, by the way, that's not the best OKR statement. And I'll show you in a second how you actually develop those OKRs. However, what it does do is it allows me now to break down this particular objective. And as you can see, these are different key results that we track and even different sub-objectives that we have as part of this particular organizational OKR, to the point that, in that instance, I know in order for me to grow my business, oh, that is impossible. Oh, I did 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to repeat that one. As part to grow my business, I need to, I don't know, develop a partner strategy, let's say. And one of my OKRs is to investigate certain regions. But I also created a project that allows me to have some activities that contribute to this particular key result. So if I go into, into this project area, for example, you can see that I now have a project that I'm in charge of that essentially allows me to create some collateral. I can see my activities. I can see what my key results will be, and that key result is ultimately what we track through tasks or activities. As you can see here, for example, is a task, developing content. I could add additional tasks, or I could actually associate a project management tool to this particular task so that you can update that in your project management tool. There are different ways how you can track that. You can do this very intuitively by simply saying, hey, you know what? The progress now is I am 34% or 50% completed, and it will then automatically update either the progress, which you can change, but I can check that in. And this now automatically not only tracks, of course, your project, it tracks ultimately the objectives and the key results as well, so that you can see how you perform against the key results and the objectives that you have been put in charge. So that's again, it's just a very quick overview of what Viva Goals does Viva Goals manages OKRs on that individual level and on the team level as well. There's a whole bunch of functionality, but again, I'm not going to go into too much details into that. The second part that I would like to outline really is the ability for us to manage this in IQ. So here, this is a Sensei IQ environment. I can go into my strategy, and within my strategy, I do have my strategic goals, but I also have now the ability to create my objectives. So let's say delight customers would be one of those objectives. Again, not a very good statement, and I'll come back to that, I promise you, where you then have the ability to outline your objectives, particular, certain perspectives, or maybe some strategic themes that you want to associate maybe for particular departmental parts, and a start and finish date. And then each of these objectives has key results. And as you can see, this particular objective has 3 different key results, a number, a percentage, or in another number. Okay, so here's acquire client evidence piece. Okay, what exactly does that mean? Let me have a look at that. And this is now the key result that I can see where we want to acquire client evidence. We can add in descriptions. We now determine the units of measure, the scale behind that, and of course the target value. And we may have a target starting value and of course our target start and finish date. So this really allows me now to focus on that. What I then do in turns is I can now track that key result. Now, this key result can either be tracked on a personal level because I contributed to that. And as you can see, I have done that here by just simply adding my own tracking part. And I can, of course, add a new OKR tracking and can say, hey, I'm going to update this. This is my update. This is my, my current actual value. In that instance, would probably be 10. And I can determine, whether this is on watch, and I can even add a particular status comment. Not going to do that here. Don't want to mess this the starter up. But as you can see, this allows me to track that. And of course, for every single project that you manage, you can associate a key result to that project where the project manager manages those tasks. So in that instance, let's say I go into this Cassowary mobile app environment. So I'm the project manager. This is my project management environment. Oh, yeah, of course. And that's exactly the one that doesn't have it. No, I changed it here. Okay. Let me just go back into my...
What Mark is demonstrating inadvertently is that different types of work can have different types of functionality, processes, and screens, just by the way, to fill that in there.
Yeah, that's right. All right, let me have a look here. I hope I find a project where I have actually tracked that. Yeah, I think this is the one that I've tracked that. So in here, oh no, my key results are gone. Here, usually as it under tracking, I have then a key results section here. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong environment. I have a key results section. Sorry, I've been in the wrong environment. That's why I just wanted to show that. So here, just go back into the strategy component here. Here are my key results that I am tracking right now. Let me do this one here. And again, these related items now show me all of the related projects. And here is now, here's the Cassowary mobile app that I had. So as a project manager, now I finally reached that point. As a project manager, I can now associate my project key dates to my project and key results. Sorry, key dates and key results. And the key results really for me are the ability to add an existing key result of an objective to my project. This could be one or many, and the ability for me to then track the key results just like we do that here as well, with the start date, with the progress update, health again, and just simply update that in here. So what that then translates to on an organizational basis is I can either track my key results on an individual basis, on a project basis, and then ultimately I can have an overarching view of those key results consolidated to see whether I am on track or not. So this is then the visualization that I wanted to outline here, where from an organizational perspective, I can, of course, outline different, I'm going to call them attributes. These are all of my objectives. Underneath are all of my key results. So here, for example, let's say, best in class in a particular country, I need to hire some subject matter experts, 100 of them. Right now, I've got 95, started in October 21 and should finish in December 2022. I can now see my goal, of course, here, and I can see every single update plot, usually per month in that instance, where I can then also see the progress of accomplishing these objectives over times, which then, of course, translating, reaching and executing strategic goals. So that's a nice example. Again, there is a whole bunch of them. That's one that we've done. Another one, I think, was this one here, where we went and just needed to create some some insights here, some other insights where I wanted to have a little bit more of a visualization. Again, this is just test data here in a sandbox, but you will see, you have the ability to determine what kind of strategy would you want to track. These strategies then have these objectives and have these key results, and they are also then linked to each other. Again, you can do sort of a bit of a trend analysis that they wanted to have over time. So a list of all of the objectives and all of the key results and how they're currently tracking. It's a nice example, or a similar one that you've already seen in my previous one, where we just simply track these OKRs. All right, so this was just a quick introduction on the concept of digitizing your OKRs on one hand with Viva Goals. Check that out in your Office 365 Teams environment, or at the example of Sensei IQ on how we do that. Now, I said a couple of times already, hey, these are not very good statements, objective statements, and really this is where the secret sauce lies. In order for us to understand how we want to implement OKRs, we need to ensure that these OKRs are clear. So when it comes to creating or writing OKRs, there are certain rules that you can do, and I will actually add a little booklet to our collateral that we will send out to you. That will go, it's a white paper that will actually outline exactly how you determine your OKRs and how you can implement them. So here, as you can see, we will an objective as measured by, and there are then the key results. So really, objectives need to be clear. They need to be inspiring, and they need to be easy to rally around. So that is really that baseline that we always want to bring us back. Now, I thought I'll give you a couple of examples of how this can look like. Again, here's a nice way of how to write them, the objectives, of how to write the key results, and then also how to determine these day-by-day tasks. So these are some examples. Increase engagement with new customers. Triple communication open rate in production from 6 to 18%, for example. Or another one, limit bureaucracy in the contract management process. Haven't we heard that before? So this is a wonderful OKR, review 10 sections in a standard contract for risks, or reduce contract negotiations work time by 200%. So these are nice OKRs on how we can accomplish them. All right. Now, this is really about just general understanding of how we write them and how we determine them, because they are essentially our nuggets that we want to distribute. But how do you implement OKRs in your organization? And you wouldn't want to do that on a piece of paper. So I just simply assume that you have some sorts of technology involved. And because OKRs are shared amongst the organizations, it does make sense to have tools available that allow you to manage those in the technology. So, adopting new technology and methodologies just simply requires buy-in and support, of course, from the business across. Now, there is a little bit of a roadmap. This is conceptual. Happy to talk to you a little bit in more detail offline, but this is really sort of the general part that we recommend. So first of all, you need to make sure recognize that you want to do an OKR, of course. You need to assemble a core team, and I'll talk about that core team a little bit more in my next slide. You need to determine how you would like to adopt the process, because lots of it is change management, people management. Make sure that you train the core team on the responsibilities, on the actions. And then you start identifying your first key results and or milestones. And then you measure that success and you reiterate that. You learn, you improve, you adopt, and you embrace. And really this adoption then, obviously, there's much more behind it. This adoption then means maybe you start with a core team, then a department, then a second, third, fifth department. I'll go a little bit more into detail in how you can actually determine those processes. Now, the two areas I'd like to talk a little bit more about is this assembly core team, just so that we have a bit of an understanding what it takes. It's not just, you know, Joe Block around the corner saying, hey, I'm sitting at my desk and want to implement OKRs. It does require more, of course, and then also a little bit more about the process. So let's talk about the core team. Now, I'm not suggesting that you will need all of them, but the most important part really is here the executive buy-in. OKRs are ultimately to determine the outcome and success of a business. So therefore, it is only normal, I hope, that executive managers want to be the advocates for that, because they ultimately are the recipient of that information. As you can see, there are some, you know, champions, some super champions, project leads, so that project managers understands how to use them. Some departmental leads, maybe early adopters, employee that are training led, and then an OKR community at a later stage. So you really can think about how to structure the ability to implement a very powerful capability of accomplishing these objectives. Now, with all of that being said, you know, you also, as part of that, need to understand your personas and personality types. Now, there's a whole suite of different personality types that you need to accommodate for, from, you know, people call it the upholder to the obliger to the rebel to the questioner. They're all different people that, you know, that are generally in one or another form inquisitive or resistant to change. I think as part of that, we also need to recognize that it's not a turnkey solution that you say, hey, I've implemented now the technology, it should all work. There is an emotional cycle of change that is talked about, where it starts to get worse before it gets better. So I, again, want to make sure that we recognize the importance of building and forming the right team and treating that team appropriately and giving them also the time and space so that they can implement that. Now, that's really sort of a bit of the roles and responsibilities and the way that you introduce that. The other part that I would like to outline is really how can you approach it? Sure, you can boil the ocean, but of course that exponentially increases the risk. Okay, thank you. 15 minutes spots, very good. That incrementally, of course, increases the risk. So what we recommend is really a roadmap approach. I'm going to call that. Maybe start at the beginning at your journey, you know, where you don't have any OKRs, where you don't have any structured rhythms, where you have limited alignment. That's sort of the reason why you would want to do that. Then you want to pilot them, validating that your OKRs actually fit for the organization, then adopting them. And you can see executive sponsorship, super important. It just doesn't make sense if executive sponsorship is not part of that. You scale this then up over time, and then you can really make this a centering capability where there is a cultural buy-in for OKRs. A lot of large organizations, the Googles of the world, have actually introduced these OKRs to focus their staff, and have been very, very successful with that. Now, how have they become successful in that? Well, you know what? They found their rhythm. So finding the rhythm is super important. Only because you can, you know, buy a car doesn't mean you drive it on a regular basis. It's the same with OKRs. You need to make sure that you find that rhythm of creating, and you do this in a time-phased basis. So here, for example, you know, before each quarter, you start to create your OKRs that are either departmental or team OKRs that are then broken down into initiatives, projects, for example, you need to go and keep on checking in throughout the quarter. You do this either through meetings or through gatherings, but visualization is super important. Again, visibility, providing that granularity, things like, Viva goals or IQ actually enable you to view the progress of that. And then at the end of each quarter, you really score and close the OKR. And conduct your retrospective, your normal team rituals to ensure that we understood what objectives and key results we have actually accomplished, why we have accomplished them, why we don't have accomplished them, whether they need to be added to the next rhythm or not, all of those things. So create, check-in, close. These are really sort of that rhythm that you would want to have. Now, rhythm is one thing, but in order to really make it stick, there are a couple of things that you should add to your rhythm. On one hand, again, I think I mentioned it now 6 times before, make it visible. It is super important to make these things visible. If they are hidden in a cupboard, then they will never be implemented. People need to be able to be accountable for that. And in order to do that, you really need to ensure that people understand the progress of that. Lead by example, don't just introduce that for someone else. Find that rigor in your own habit and update them on a regular basis. And of course, use reminders is for me probably more a trigger of use technology, digitize rhythm with, for example, reminders, add them into your calendar, all of those things that allow you to not forget those key results tracking capability. And you can do this also through the process of what they call stack habits. Now, stack habits is a strategy really for implementing a behavior, a small incremental behavior. I'll give you an example. Let's say I recognize that I need to drink more water because I don't drink enough water. So one of these stack habits would be saying, hey, in the morning I drink coffee, so I have that habit. For each coffee that I drink, I'm going to drink a glass of water. So that's the type of stack habits that we are referring to. So if you combine all of those capabilities from, on one hand, understanding what OKRs are, recognizing that this would be a very beneficial way for you to manage and lead your organization. If you understand how to deploy or how to roll that out by finding your right role, your right team, your right roadmap, and continuously reiterating it. If you then introduce the digital process as part of that introduction, then you can really make this a huge cultural change. Again, a lot of large organizations do that. It's a very American thing to do right now, Ryan, I think. I hear this often in America. I haven't heard it that much in Australia. It comes up more and more, and people are curious about OKRs. But, in your experience, what do you think?
Well, we have 6 organizations on this call using OKRs already. I'm seeing over the last even 6 months, more and more people are aware of it, talking about it. A year ago, didn't know what you're talking about. Now It's definitely spreading across here.
Yeah, interesting if you consider that, that this is actually not a new process, right? It's actually quite old. Really? It really has been revitalized. And I think one of the reasons is because it's actually, the update mechanism is quite easy. You just need to update, your date, your number, quick comment, and, a traffic light.
It makes sense. There's no process. There's an objective and we measure it. Everyone can understand that. We have a nice traffic light.
Yeah. Now look at this. Hey, I'm even a little bit earlier. We have come to questions very quickly because we had so many questions that that hopefully that we can answer through the process of what we've just outlined, and also based on our experience. Now, we had abundance of questions. Again, thank you very much for submitting them beforehand. It allows us to focus on those ones as well. What I've done is I've grouped them a little bit into, I'm going to call them themes, roughly speaking, just so that we can outline them. So, how do OKRs drive positive action in an organization? Well, it's a good question, right? Now, positive interaction, in my view, is if you see progress, then that's a positive thing, right? So try to focus on the key results tracking so that we have the ability to see the progress, and everybody likes progress, right?
For me, it's tracking, because if you don't measure it, you can't change it. But it keeps everyone honest. It cuts out the noise. If everyone is linked to an OKR, that's what you do, and you don't do anything else. It's about, the big rocks versus the pebbles versus the sand. This is focusing on the rocks.
Yeah, exactly. Look, next one, best way to balance the team versus strategy pool from an OKR perspective. Well, I don't actually think that there is a pool, and please, butt in if you disagree with that. The purpose of the OKR is for teams to be focused so that they can ultimately accomplish the strategy. So it shouldn't be a pull. It should actually accommodate it, so that I know, hey, the key result of my objective is because I need to reach strategic goal number 5 or 7. So that's my view on that. Right.
Now, on this one, I do, and it depends what people are meaning here, really, but I do sometimes see organizations who have, let's call it a less dictatorial leadership. And as a result, the teams are doing what they think is best and coming up with their own direction. And that's very good, but it does lead to politics. And it's back to what Mark was saying. If you don't have the objectives from the top cascading down and you all align to that, I'd rather rewrite that question as, are those teams aligned to the organizational strategy properly? Because they're probably not,
Yes.
Which is why the question's being asked.
Yes, I fully agree with that. Yes. A greater understanding of the differences and how to use them. Okay, sorry, this was just a remark from one of the participants. Yeah, look, I hope that we are able to give you sort of a better understanding of what these OKRs mean. And funnily enough, there are lots of organizations that have that concept that just don't call it OKRs. I mean, Ryan, we have EOS, right? The Entrepreneurial Operating System, and we are running, which isn't essentially nothing else. We just call them ROCs, which are our quarterlies, right? And they are essentially the objectives that we then need to fulfill, have our to-dos and actions and track them as well. So there are different ways how you can do that. The mechanism is the same. I think the big advantage here in the OKRs is really that the objectives line up to the strategy, so that you know why you do those. What are the characteristics of OKRs that will accelerate an organization and not hold back? What are the characteristics of that? Well, first of all, most organizations that decide to introduce OKRs, I think, are struggling with visibility on how strategy is executed. And I think it just comes naturally that you would accelerate an organization, not holding it back, by introducing those OKRs so that we have the same language to talk to and the same tracking to do. So that would probably be my answer. I know it's it's always difficult, as Ryan mentioned earlier. There are lots of company politics, and as we've seen with the personas, when it comes to OKRs, we need to accommodate for them. And there's again a huge aspect. I did group a couple of others together here. How do you avoid duplicating OKRs with what potentially may be tracked somewhere else? Or should there be one and the same? That's a really good question. Ryan, what do you think? I know you're sorry. You've just you've just answered
no,
one of the questions in
I'm
the
busy
chat.
just answering something related to this, though, in that we have what Simon's talking about in the chat is we have benefits which could be tracked. We have OKRs which could be
I can come
tracked.
to that.
Yeah, for me, it's really about trying to come up with one approach that you can duplicate in multiple areas and then link them together. So it's sort of get rid of the duplicate approaches. Something like an OKR approach is so simple to start with. It's deceptive in its simplicity. I would essentially say, well, let's not duplicate anymore. So if you are tracking the same thing in different areas, you want to integrate those. It's about that digitization at the end of the day to get that insight across everything. But try to come up with one process, one method, being the OKRs, then spread it out, but then find the duplication, highlight it, and automate it so you don't have to go and redo all that work.
Yeah, so Simon here then, yes, says, so really OKRs are applied to the person, cascading down, and therefore fit more into the HR context. That's a good question, Simon. It hooks into accomplishing your objectives, and that is either on an individual or team level. And I think that's the important part. It's very similar to, to agile delivery. Now, agile delivery is always very team focused and doesn't really look at it so much from a project focused point of view. They continuously have new value chains that they are incorporating. OKRs allow me as a team and individual to track results, and some of these results are executed through projects. Now, when it comes to benefit realization, I will actually come back. There is another question there that I will answer then, because benefit realization is of course another way of determining the benefit of a particular project, program, or portfolio. I'm just going to call them initiatives. But again, I don't believe that a lot of benefits. First of all, there are not a lot of organizations that do benefit realization. That's one thing. And the second part is not a lot of those organizations who do benefit realizations do not necessarily link them directly to the strategy, therefore making it, again, the translation of the benefits into accomplishing the strategy quite difficult. I think that's one of the main reasons. Can you provide tips on getting the business to understand their own goals, objective through the project work and translate those into measurements of success? Oh, this is a great question. This is sort of toggling it the other way around. Well, usually leadership should come up with the reasons why you have an organization and the goals that you want to accomplish. So it's actually the other way around. And then projects are executing the output of those strategies.
We see a lot of this with benefits, where projects are defining their own benefits completely in isolation from the benefits, the project next to them. It's good that they're thinking about these goals, these benefits, but it's the wrong thing to do. Because if you're all inventing your own way of doing it and your own goals and objectives, it then comes down to who can sell this thing the best, as opposed to what's best for the company.
Yeah, it's really that value-driven part that I really like about OKRs. How many benefits do we have that are not measurable? Saying, oh, well, I can't measure them. Remember, measurable is the key here to determine value. Now, yeah, how do you avoid duplicating OKRs? Yes, of course, on one hand, you would, just like the same way that you try to avoid having the same project twice, digitizing, centralizing it. Thank you. 15 more minutes. Centralizing it, making it visible will definitely do that. And I know that the ability for you to to consolidate your OKRs into different areas is actually the key here, because yeah, some of the OKRs may be similar, but they may still be different to different departments. Oh, yeah. All right. Sorry, that was this one here. Yeah. Okay. So now, is that the benefit realization? No, not just yet. How can we build outcomes evaluating into the process of meeting OKRs? How can we build outcome evaluating? Well, the outcome evaluating is really the OKR. It's the key result that you want to track. This is essentially the process of saying, hey, my objective is to do this. My key result is I need to accomplish those in order to achieve my objectives, and the key result tracking is ultimately the key, is ultimately the evaluation of the outcome as you build your OKR. How do key results translate to projects? Again, I think I showed that in the project. It took me, an environment or two to show you that, but a project is a contributor to key results. It could well be that a project is a fully dedicated project to accomplish those key results as well. However, the key result is not biased. It doesn't say, hey, this key result is, that's why you generally have a key result owner, by the way. This key result can be accomplished in a multitude of different ways that could, that could be done concurrently on an individual and at the same time on a project basis. So it's a value tracking on a project. How do OKRs fit into portfolio management, and how does Sensei IQ do portfolio management, if at all? So yes, we do, of course, portfolio management, and a portfolio in many ways is implemented or is implementing value to the organization. Now, just like that's why I call it initiatives, not just projects or programs or portfolios. Initiatives have the ability to, to track and accomplish these objectives. Just like you would generally implement a portfolio to do benefit realization. Often I hear that, oh, this project needs to realize that benefits. Well, 9 times out of 10 projects will be closed by the time benefits are realized. So benefits, projects develop outputs to a benefit, but the portfolio generally realizes the benefit, and a portfolio could very much work the same way in the OKR sense. How do you align OKRs with ever-changing strategy in today's digital environment? I really like that question, because it kind of entails that strategy needs to change. Often I determine an ever-changing strategy. Well, organizations don't ever change strategy. That do change strategies maybe every 3 to 5 years. What happens though is tactics on how to achieve those strategies may change, and maybe the value proposition of the strategy may change. But really, let's not forget, OKRs support strategic execution. So that means, let's assume I have, I don't know, 5 OKRs that contribute to a strategic goal, and now suddenly that strategic goal has changed. Well, we do need to then evaluate the OKRs to determine whether they are still fit for purpose. How do you manage traceability from a project output, deliverable to strategic goals? Yeah, well, that was the, the $100,000 question. Most, if not all times, there is no direct correlation to the strategy. That's the reason why that sort of in between strategic goals and project execution is that concept of OKRs. That is more understandable, has more buy-in, and can then actually be mapped to the strategic goal and not the project itself. Okay, how to identify OKRs? Well, these are the objectives that an organization needs to come up with based on their strategic goals. So it's hard for me to give you a formula for that, but the way on how you determine an OKR and how you describe it, I've showed you that earlier, and I think it's actually quite natural that you identify those objectives. Let's say, we want to, one of our strategic goals is what is a digital transformation, prime example. Well, one of the objectives is we want to make sure that we mobilize, that we provide mobility to all of our staff. That would be an objective then that reaches that goal of digital transformation. Tips on making time to focus on objectives. Well, honestly, I know that as project managers, we need to spend time managing risks and issues and all of those things. But when it comes down to the essence of what we do as part of our project, and talking in project management terms, we want to accomplish these objectives. So my tip of making time for objectives is actually focus on tracking them, because that's the ultimate reason why you have that project. Yes, you need to manage your risks and issues and change requests and schedules and all of those things, but these are only mechanisms for you to accomplish the objective. What is the project management role in meeting OKRs? Well, often there are part responsible for delivering those key results, of course. So therefore, project managers are often responsible for contributing to the key results if the key results is shared amongst different people. But again, a key result usually has a key result owner. Okay, this is where, yeah, how do you map OKRs to benefit realization? Well, you know, I've really had to think about this hard. And I actually believe it's one or the other. It's definitely not both. It's one or the other, because benefit realization is always or mostly put in the context of initiatives, project program, portfolio management. OKRs are put in the context of teams and individuals that are and projects contributing to these OKRs. So benefit realizations and OKRs are really different disciplines in their own right. They want to accomplish the same thing. They want to be able to measure a benefit or an objective that I want to reach, a value to the organization. So I think it's one or the other. I can't believe, I could not come up with a way of how you could map OKRs into benefit realization, Ryan.
And I've been thinking about this, and I've been reading up on this a lot, and no one has actually sat down and really thought about that. And I've been thinking that if you take a benefit, as what Simon was saying in the chat, benefits are about outcomes and outputs. But what about if we take the benefit out of it? A project brings about change. It brings about outcomes and outputs. The project, take the benefit out. Well, you now have to measure, has that happened over time in a satisfactory way? You plan it way before the project, you plan the expectation. That is the key result, expected key result. You measure it afterwards, for years after the project, that again is the key result. So I think we can take a piece of the benefit, pull the benefit out and wrap the OKR around that. So I'm agreeing with you in that.
Good question.
I think it's one or the other.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that would be my take on it.
We may be wrong. Let us know, you know.
What's the difference between an OKR and KPI? That's number one question I always get. I love that. Well, they are both acronyms. That's the commonality. Well, an OKR obviously. Yeah, they both have 3 letters. An OKR is obviously a process for you to reach a particular objectives, whereby a key performance indicator gives you a target. It is a visualization of the target that you need to accomplish, or the range that you need to accomplish. So that's the difference between a key performance indicator that just means, hey, my performance on risk management, on issue management is in the green, whereby the objectives and key results really is the mechanism for you to execute your tasks to reach that objective. And that's the difference. I've got one more, I think, yes, before we then need to wrap up. We've got another 5 minutes, and I do want to quickly open up, of course, the audience to see whether there are any questions. How does project risk align to strategic risk rating, tolerance, and appetite for enterprise? How can we make that data point visible? Okay, so this is more about risk management. I'm going to park this one. It has not so much to do with OKRs. Maybe, you know, we haven't done a risk management Ask the Expert session in quite some time, Ryan. Maybe that's something we should.
About 2 months ago, actually.
Did we?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, you did? Oh, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, that was when I was on holiday. Yeah. Knowing that there are various types of PMOs, what OKR categories are relevant and more crucial to each type? More crucial to each type of PMO? Well, look, I think PMOs, the function of the PMOs, whether they're enterprise PMOs or strategic PMOs, ultimately is governance and streamlining the ability for us to provide organizational value as quickly as possible. I could even imagine that, you know, OKRs could be held in a PMO, even though it's probably more on a, you know, on a departmental or executive level. But really, there's no categorization of an OKR that is particular for a PMO. It is the ability to accomplish the key results, so the ability to accomplish the objectives actually. And of course, the PMO has the ability to track that as part of the initiatives that they are in charge of. Our organization delivers on some of our key results through projects, yeah. We find ourselves reporting using two methods, scale grading for the key results and project status against the project. Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, as part of your project status, so that's my take on it. As part of your project status update, you need to update values, your finances, your schedule, your risks, your issues, well, and also, of course, your key results tracking. So I actually see the key result tracking may form part of your status, of your project status update. And that then, of course, rolls up into the objectives as much as your finance ultimately rolls up into a program and a portfolio. So that's how I see that. It is another artifact that I manage in order to determine the success of the project. So that's how I would take that. All right, I think, hey, look at that. We still have 3 minutes. That allows me to open up the forum and maybe give us some of your, I mean, there are some organizations that already do OKRs. Maybe you have 1 or 2 or 3 sentences where you can recommend or outline how you started that journey. And please don't be shy. Okay, shy audience. Well, actually, we've got quite a few questions in the chat box, which is great. Being conscious that we only have a few minutes left, I'm going to close the Q&A session then, and going to outline our key takeaways. I know this was a basic session of OKRs. I'm happy to dive a little bit deeper into that. Please give us that feedback if you are interested in, in how this can be, how this can be done in a deeper way. But really, the main takeaways here is, OKRs give you focus and transparency, achieving your strategic goals. And that's really on all levels. It's team-centric, individual-centric, with the project delivery being part of that OKR. And that's, again, outlining the individual teams executing the OKRs through the initiatives. Without key stakeholder meeting and executive buy-in, you can't be successful. So, it really needs to come from the level that allows us to introduce change. And the last thing is really introduce a habit and ingrain it into your routine, again, through the visibility and transparency. But ultimately, you want to embed that into your cultural thinking. Just like organizations know that on Fridays I need to do timesheets, organizations do know that, hey, by the end of the week, I need to outline what I contributed as part of my key results. So I'm going to track it, once a week or once a month. So really make sure that habit and routine, thank you, that habit and routine is upheld. Well, look at this, right on time. Thank you very much for your time and for sacrificing your lunch break. I hope it was worth your while. Next steps for us is, of course, keep on the lookout. The webinar recording will be sent out with a slide deck, of course, as well as a booklet on OKRs. I'd like you to have a look at that. It's from GitHub. It's actually quite good. It's a good starter. Do update us and register for the next upcoming event, which is super interesting. Ryan, I hear this word every second day these days. It is all about PPM and artificial intelligence. Oh, yep. Do you want to get a sneak preview for that one?
Well, Mark, we can't find any real intelligence, so we're trying to get the computers to work for us. But basically, we're going to look at the concepts around AI. We're going to ask a lot of questions around what do you think it actually means, because this is completely wide open. And we're going to look at what some companies have done and some practical examples of some of the technology that's out there, and also give you some things to think about in terms of if you want to go down this path. There's, like Mark went through today, some practical tips. We'll go through some of those as well.
Yeah,
so it's one of these things that's going to grow over the years. Yeah,
and interesting, I noticed on the 25th of October in Melbourne is an AI PM conference that talks a lot about AI in the PPM world. So I wonder whether whether there's some content that you can share as well. Anywho, yeah. That was all about OKRs. I hope you had a great time. Thank you very much. Please don't be shy and give us your evaluation. And if you haven't connected with us via LinkedIn, please do so as well. With that, I'll hand it over to you, Gemma. Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.